The Oklahoma Sooners landed one wide receiver and now are continuing to trend in the right direction for another wide receiver in the 2024 class. We'll talk about that and why are the Oklahoma Sooners scoring the spring game like they're scoring it? Are they going to be actually able to go to the SEC after this? We'll find out on today's episode of Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. And shout out to every member of the Everyday Club tuning in to the Sooners. Locked On Sooners on the podcast side or the YouTube side. I'm John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. My buddy here is Josh Helmer. You can follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Sooners. And let's get started with this, Josh, before we talk about this crazy spring game scoring system that resembles a fantasy football league. Let's talk about the wide receiver position and the Oklahoma Sooners. We talked on our show yesterday about the commitment of KJ Daniels, the receiver out of Louisiana. And now we have another prediction for five-star wide receiver Bryant Wesco landing with the Sooners. Now it's been trending that direction, but given the moves by TCU, the push there, he's also spent some time with Texas. The fact that Oklahoma is continuing to lead this race and recruiting analysts. This most recent prediction coming from Sam Spiegelman, the national recruiting analyst for On3, that bodes really, really well for the Oklahoma Sooners, a guy that I've likened to a CeeDee Lamb type of player. Get me this guy on campus, get him in Jeff Levy's offense, get him with Jackson Arnold at quarterback, Michael Hawkins at quarterback, and dude, let's watch this guy thrive.
You know, it's kind of amazing, too, when you break down his numbers. Has played for a program that runs the flex bone. And, oh, by the way, went out and had 58 grabs for 1,100 yards and 14 touchdowns. So he already has mind-boggling high school numbers, which is typical of a lot of these recruits we're talking about.
And that's CeeDee Lamb's 2019 season right there. Very few catches, but big-time receiving yards and a lot of touchdowns.
And plays after the catch, which I think Oklahoma's, searching for wide receivers that can go catch the football and then do some stuff after the catch. Kind of been searching for that next guy that's great in that department for Oklahoma. But, man, with the Daniels commitment, the sheer speed that you've brought in there, yes, it's a little bit of a flyer ad if you're looking simply based on the recruiting rankings right now. So what makes Oklahoma fans excited about Daniels' commitment? Oh, that's right. If you can pair it with Wesco, who is a five-star talent, according to 24/7 Sports, John, and really everywhere else you look is a high four-star blue chipper. On3 and ESPN, based on my understanding, he would end up as a five-star according to their rankings too, because he's 26th nationally per On3. He's 23rd nationally per ESPN. So, I mean, that's three of the four major recruiting services that are saying Wesco, 6'2", 170, this receiver that, John, arguably is the best in his class.
And he could very well end up being the number one wide receiver in the class with the way that his trajectory has gone so far. I mean, it feels very similar to what Jackson Arnold did last year at Apojo where, they ended their junior season as four-star players. And then, as the offseason progressed, started gaining more recruiting momentum, seeing that profile rise a little bit through the 7-on-7 stuff. He's gonna continue to grow in that regard. He's gonna see his star status improve, whether it's with Rivals or ESPN. And it would not surprise me if by the end of it, he is the number one wide receiver in the class, and he's a five-star across the board because he's got that kind of a talent. I know that it's just crazy to compare anybody to CeeDee Lamb, but again, that's just the guy that I see when I watch him, is somebody who can make plays after the catch. He plays big. He can go up and get the football. He can play, above the rim. He can win 50-50 situations. He can run a full route tree. I mean, that's to me the thing that's impressive. And then you talk about the offense that he's working in to be as productive and as impressive as he is. That just goes a long way. It takes it a whole nother level for me, because you're not seeing a lot of, high school offenses running outside of spread, outside of, 3-4 wide receiver sets in Texas high school football, especially. And to see a guy who's probably getting a very high percentage of the target shares in his team's offense and continue to thrive, like, this guy is going to be a really, really good player. I know it's easy to kind of fall into the hype of what he looks like, against high school talent, high school competition. But again, there's a reason why everybody's continuing to, throw, higher rankings at him. Like ESPN bumped him up like more than 100 spots in their latest re-rank of the, ESPN 300. So there's something to be said for the talent that he's displaying. And I think you're right, Josh. You pair a KJ Daniels and a Bryant Wesco, two very different skill sets, but both guys who can make a lot of plays after the catch. I really love the pairing. And I likened KJ Daniels to a Marquise Brown. I've talked about Bryant Wesco as a CeeDee Lamb. Which two wide receivers thrived, playing together? Marquise Brown and CeeDee Lamb. So, why not just go recreate that situation that you had for you back in the 2017, 2018 seasons, and just go get it. Now all you need is, your Davin Mitchell to be your Mark Andrews, and you've got the three-headed monster in the receiving game all over again.
No doubt. And, pairing Wesco with somebody who's more of a speed option, just the different body types in a signing class, John, would be terrific for Oklahoma. It'd be the first major recruiting win, though, as well, for Emmett Jones, who, again, has come into Oklahoma with this track record, John, of being somebody that can go into that Dallas-Fort Worth metro area and really lock it down for some of the top names. And if and when this turns into a commitment for Oklahoma and eventually a signing, again, this is going to be a major recruiting win for Oklahoma. I mean, you're talking about OU's up against Clemson, LSU, TCU, who, of course, just played in a national championship game. And so what was one of the questions we got a lot this past season as TCU won a college football playoff game and then went and played for a national championship? It was, well, do you have to start worrying about TCU more seriously in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and beyond in just the state of Texas? And I think the answer to that was, yeah, I mean, sure, you're alerted to it, but here straight away, if you could win this type of recruiting battle over at TCU when they do have that little momentum behind them, John, and then LSU and Clemson, two programs that have each won national championships recently, this would be a big-time recruiting win for Emmett Jones. And again, Spiegelman, his prediction coming in, that's a national recruiting analyst who's not just putting that recruiting prediction in for On Three. He's not just putting it in willy-nilly, John. He has it on some good authority that this is trending in Oklahoma's direction.
And there's good reason to believe that. And, you talked about TCU. They've been kind of the school that Oklahoma's had to do battle with so far early in this cycle, at least in the early part of the 2024 calendar year, with Michael Hawkins, Bryant Wesco. Now they're going to, see where this all ends up. We don't know a commitment date for Wesco yet, but things continue to just trend in a positive direction for him. Isaiah Autry, guys like Jaden Hardy, David Stone, Williams Nwaneri. I mean, it's a class that's continuing to sound pretty positive. And again, I talked about it yesterday. This class could be as good or even better than what we got in 2023. And that's just a good sign for Oklahoma and just evidence of what this staff is able to do on the recruiting trail. Now, again, it may take the 2024-2025 season before we start seeing that take shape on the field, as they're still dealing with a big time turnover of the roster that they've underwent over the last 2 years. Speaking of turnover, Josh, there's quite the turnover to the scoring system and the format for the Oklahoma Sooners spring game. And we're wondering, are they going to be forced to go to the American Athletic Conference instead of the SEC after this? We'll find out after Josh talks to y'all about FanDuel.
I don't think they're going to. I don't think they're losing the SEC bid, but we can discuss here in a moment. Grand slams, no hitters, double plays. They're back. That's right. Major League Baseball is back, and there's no better place to get in on the MLB action than with FanDuel. That's America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers, you could step right up to the plate. No sweat, first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon where you can sign up, place your first bet, and again, get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. Hope that that first couple of bets just goes well, but hey, it's nice to have that little safety net, strike 4, if you will, right? $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. So don't miss your chance to get that no sweat first bet. Would you join FanDuel today? Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, an official partner of Major League Baseball. Yeah, the scoring for the spring game, and I'm not crazy about it. To me, there's too much thinking involved. I'll tell you this. I like offense versus defense. I like that little component to the spring game for Oklahoma. I'll let you run down the scoring in detail in just a moment, John, but just generally speaking, I do have to laugh. Somebody pointed out on the radio side with us today, here we complain about, oh, the spring game needs to be more exciting, or you need to play somebody else during a spring game. And then lo and behold, there's the University of Oklahoma here in this instance comes up with this intricate, different, haven't seen it before scoring format. And everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, but it seemed like the early overwhelming response was, oh my goodness, what are they doing with this scoring system? And I would second that. It's just kind of funny. That's a fair counterpoint to be made that, okay, they're trying to innovate and do something a little bit different. But my general rule of thumb, John, would be this. I love offense versus defense, but to me, man, yeah, I mean, look, if you're watching on YouTube, look at some of the scoring here. If you have to think this much individually play to play, oh, wait, a sack is worth how many points? Now, wait a second. Why did the defense they got 2 points for a PBU? To me, that's probably not the greatest thing, but hey, here we are, right?
Yeah, I'm looking at this and I'm wondering, why is the offense getting 2 points for a punt? So Oklahoma's trailing by 1. Oklahoma's offense trailing by 1, less than 30 seconds to go in the game. And well, I guess the defense does get 5 points for a punt. So it's still a net negative of 3. I don't know.
So just give the defense 3 points.
Yeah, just give the defense 3 points and just quit giving the offense points for giving the ball back. Like, I don't like the idea that you turn over on downs, that should be negative points. You miss a field goal, that should be negative points. You get a turnover, that should be negative points. Like, okay, maybe you don't want to take points away. You don't want to see the scoreboard go backward or end up with a negative score in the game. But yeah, it's just a little bit, and maybe that's just their way of, preventing the offense from ending up with a negative score, because that would look kind of bad. The offense, red team -3, defense 13 or whatever. That'd be a really bad score to probably be able to, to be putting out there on social media. Too many people would have a laugh at that. So it's unique. It's intriguing. I really liked the format last year. I thought that having, kind of a split squad scrimmage, I think that just made a lot of sense for what this team was trying to do and create competition and things like that. This seems more just kind of like a scrimmage or like a practice more than it does like a game. And the talk has been kind of bandied about a little bit. Would you prefer to play an actual opponent in your spring game as an exhibition game versus as a spring game? And when Brent Venables was asked about that, he's like, well, if everybody else was doing it, then we'd be interested in doing that too. Of course, there'd be a lot of different details that they'd have to iron out. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure that they, try to talk through as many scenarios as they could. And this is what the best thing that they could come up with for this kind of a scrimmage. But it is intriguing for sure.
Well, and hopefully more than anything, if you're doing offense versus defense, give me a healthy dose of the ones. I know that folks are going to be excited, and we can talk about it either in just a moment or later this week, John, for the Everyday Club. You can tune in for that maybe. But, yeah, you want to see the Jackson Arnolds of the world. You want to see these freshmen that have just arrived. But show me the ones. Show me good on good in this spring game. If we're going offense, defense, which, again, I dig out of everything, that is this, the scoring system aside, Yeah, I want to see how things look out there 1-versus-1, John.
And I can see that argument where, if you have a split squad scrimmage, then you're mixing up your ones and twos together, and you might not have starters going against starters. You might have a starter going against a backup and vice versa. So I do get that point of it. I like the idea of it being an actual game. This to me just is a glorified practice. It's just going to have a very different feel to it. People love points. So is that going to be one of those things where it's like, okay, the offense, is going to have more people behind them, and it's going to be disappointing if they don't score enough and the defense wins this? It's just an odd dynamic. And I really liked the format from last year where they went up against each other. But again, your point is valid. You're going to get better reps, with Walter Rouse going up against Rondo Bothroyd than Walter Rouse going up against, pick your defensive end too. But I'd also be intriguing to see Adepoju Adebawore going up against Walter Rouse, like giving your young kids like that an opportunity to go up against some of the starters. That would be intriguing as well. But speaking of the true freshmen, and speaking of one, PJ Adebawore, Josh, I wanted to ask you, are there any true freshmen that you're really just itching to watch that you can't wait to watch on Saturday in the spring game?
Yeah, Peyton Bowen, right? I mean, PJ Adebawore, the 2 5-star signees, those are the guys. Jackson Arnold, of course, any of the 5-star signees for Oklahoma. But honestly, I think I can wait a little bit to see Arnold. Like if you said, okay, you get to pick 2 of these 3, I would pick both of the defensive players. And I don't think that necessarily every Oklahoma fan would agree with that, because look, you want to see what's next. And who knows, there's some out there, I think it's a very small minority, but there's probably some out there that to some degree are like, well, maybe Jackson Arnold's going to win this job before the season's over. And maybe he's just that special. This would be the first glimpse at all of that. But to me, man, I want to see the shiny new toys, the potential defensively, because that's where Oklahoma needs to improve the most, John.
It is where they need to improve the most. And I'll stick on the defensive side of the ball, and I want to see the 4-star defensive backs, especially at cornerback. I want to see what Makari Vickers has. I want to see Kendall Dolby, although he was a JUCO addition. I mean, he's in his first year with the Sooners. I want to see Josiah Wagner, have a chance to go up against the ones. The departure of, Jaden Davis, that opens the door for some of these guys to make an impact in year one with the Sooners, even though you're probably looking at Gentry Williams and Jaden Rowe getting more opportunities and a Kendall Dolby getting more opportunities to start early on. It would not surprise to see a guy like Makari Vickers or Josiah Wagner, get out there and win a job, even as true freshmen. I mean, it's not unheard of for a true freshman to get out there and start. It's not. But they're going to have a lot of, intestinal fortitude to be able to do that in the Big 12 out there as a true freshman, going up against some of the best passing offenses in the country week in and week out. So there's a lot of really intriguing names to watch. Is there a veteran that you think like has to have a really, really good camp to solidify himself as either a starter or a member of the 2 deep before he kind of gets pushed down by one of the youngsters?
Well, dependent upon some of the young defensive backs that we're talking about here, I don't know how to feel if Jaden Davis's departure, if that makes it more likely that Woody Washington now has a spot, or if there's some serious competition from these younger defensive backs. And what about Dolby? How does, speaking of newcomers, how does he fit into that equation? So Woody Washington, for him to look like a veteran is probably really important because, again, the secondary and cornerback in particular, John, has not been great for OU. So he would be one of the first names, I think, for me that would come to mind where, okay, there's all this great potential, and we've seen that in flashes, in bunches at times from Woody Washington. But is it on a solid foundation? I don't know.
And that'll be what we'll be watching for. I think other veterans, you can look at it, your veteran edge group, in particular, the guys that have been with this program, Reggie Grimes, Marcus Stripling, Ethan Downs. Oklahoma really went into the transfer portal to add edge talent in Rondo Bothroyd, Trace Ford. You brought in Deshaun McCullough, who's going to, feature as the cheetah, but you could use him as an edge as well. You're also looking at the development and the progression of R. Mason Thomas. I think those three guys, although I do think Ethan Downs is pretty well solidified, I do think Reggie Grimes and Marcus Stripling are guys that, have to keep working and grinding it to continue to fight for their role on this roster, considering how much depth is on the defensive line now. And with the positive talk that's out there about a Jacob Lacey and a Jonah Lula, where does that leave Jordan Kelly and Isaiah Coe? Again, they're going to use a lot of rotations at the defensive tackle spot and at the edge, but who's going to kind of be the guy that they're counting on in third and long situations to come up with a stop? Linebacker is going to be intriguing. We talked about that in the live show, just as a position group, because of basically the inexperience. I think it's hindering people's ability to kind of believe in the depth that they have at linebacker. The talent is there. It's just inexperienced talent. So it's just a matter of like getting them in game situations and then allowing them to grow. A guy like Jerry Kanik, who got to play some as a true freshman, now he should start to take off because he's got a little bit more experience than everybody else on the linebacker depth chart. Now it's time for him to step up and take on a significant role.
Well, if not Woody Washington, then to me, it's definitely the edge guys or defensive tackle. It just feels like defensive line, nothing's given there. I don't know that anybody, defensive end, edge guy, however you want to describe it, defensive tackle, I don't know that anything's set in stone with those spots going into fall camp and then obviously next season, John. Whereas Woody Washington, I say his name just because of the collective, the collective poor play in the secondary for an extended period of time. But honestly, he's got to be feeling better than anybody up front, right? So yeah, those would be names to watch and interesting position groups to watch, I think, in this red-white game for Oklahoma.
Well, it's like I mentioned, again, back to the live show. If you listen every day, you've heard me say this, but if you're not listening every day, then you kind of miss out on things. So I'll repeat it. Since 2021, the Oklahoma Sooners have only two guys that started for them back then left on the roster. Andrew Rame, Woody Washington. That's all you got. So you've had near 100% turnover from the starting lineup in 2021 to now. So it's important to have guys, veterans like Woody Washington, like Andrew Rame, really be at the forefront and be leaders for this team. But they also have to prove it on a day-to-day basis. They got to prove it on the field. They got to prove it when they go to Cincinnati. They got to prove it, in the Red River Showdown. This team has to be better, and those veteran guys have to be the ones that lead that. Speaking of Austin, well, not speaking of Austin, but speaking of Texas, which leads me to Austin, Josh, and that'll lead me to the women's professional fast pitch draft that happened on Monday night. Alex Storako was taken #1 overall by the Oklahoma City Spark. So first of all, if you haven't heard, there's a professional women's fast pitch team in Oklahoma City called the Spark. One Jocelyn Allo, one Lindsey Elam, former Sooners, also played for that team. Alex Storako went #1 overall to the Spark. Also going to be joined by Haley Lee, who went with the first pick in the 4th round to the Spark. Grace Lyons goes to Texas, going to play in Austin for the Texas Smoke. That's a great name. I think the Oklahoma City Spark and the Texas Smoke, just two really, really great names for softball teams.
Texas Smoke is pretty cool. I got to admit.
I like that.
I got to admit it. OKC Spark. Yeah, it'll be fun to watch how all of this develops. We need to reach out to Plank and just get him on the podcast to share a little bit of his insight from, he was emceeing the WPF draft the other night. So just sort of his general takeaways from how things are going, what the night was like, and then what sort of the schedule looks like going forward. I know that mid-June is when all of this gets underway. So sort of right after the Women's College World Series ends, that's when you jump into the professional WPF season in Oklahoma City and in Norman. So it's going to be, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to have professional softball here. And Storako staying home is great news for fans around here.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's a sport that's growing, and that's really, really cool. We've seen the growth take place at the collegiate level and the youth levels. It's just blown up all over the country. The ratings have never been better. I mean, Oklahoma and LSU got an ESPN2 slot last week, a primetime slot, which is fantastic for the sport. And it's going to continue to grow because people are continuing to flock to it. You know, women's sports in general, I don't know if you saw the number, but you know, the national championship, the 4 on the floor from Saturday, had its best number ever for women's gym on ABC. So they're getting the profile, they're getting the opportunities to be out in front of a national television audiences, and that's continuing to grow the sport. Well, now you have 4 teams where just, you know, last year when the WPF launched, it had just 2. It had the Smash It Vipers and the USSSA. I think there's 3 S's. Pride, 2 clubs. And within a year, they've already doubled that with the Oklahoma City Spark and the Texas Smoke. So it's encouraging to see the growth of softball continuing to happen, and that Oklahoma Sooners are going to be kind of at the forefront of that, especially with the Oklahoma City Spark. Lauren Chamberlain, she's the commissioner of the WPF, but you're going to see Oklahoma Sooner players getting drafted very highly and very often in this league.
Yeah, and hopefully wind up with a team that isn't just littered with Oklahoma Sooners, but certainly has plenty of former Sooners, but just some of the best players in the sport, right? Hopefully you wind up with, you know, with the limited amount of teams right now, you would think that everybody's going to be pretty good, John. I mean, assuming that nobody's just drafted incredibly poorly here, would seem almost difficult to do that, given, again, the relative lack of depth just in terms of sheer number of teams right now. But hopefully for the long haul, this thing is here to stay, and Oklahoma City winds up with a team that fans can be proud of and want to go watch, because I do think right now, in large part, mostly because of Oklahoma, but also because of what Oklahoma State is doing, you've got a state that is a rabid softball state right now. So I think there should be some pretty good support for this thing.
Yeah, and you can even also throw Tulsa into the mix as well as a program that's doing really, really well in softball. But folks, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for being a part of the show, and thank you so much to the Everyday Club tuning in and listening every single day here on Locked On Sooners. Again, follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. You can follow Josh on Twitter at JoshOnRef. You can follow the show at Locked On Sooners on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and to let you know when new episodes drop a like. And if you feel inclined to do so, we'd love you to leave an Apple review. Go give us 5 stars over there and tell people how you feel about the show. It just helps more people find out about the show. So thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time, he's Josh Helmer. I'm John Williams. Boomer Sooner.